New York Times has taken a look at the election yesterday in Alabama and come up with what they consider to be four takeaways from Doug Jones's victory yesterday in Alabama. First of all, it was a suburban shellacking for Roy Moore. I guess the way the demographic breakdown is that urban means, I'm not sure, it means black folk and of all ages and younger white folk. Suburban means, in the political lingo, means white middle-class families. And then rural, in the language, the electoral language, rural means dumb shits who live out in the country, I guess. Oh, come on, stop. I grew up with relatives who live out in the country. That's just the way the language is used to describe these different voting blocks. So when they say a suburban shellacking for Moore, they mean that voters in Alabama cities and the most affluent suburbs overwhelmingly rejected this asshole, which, according to Times, is an ominous sign for Republicans on the ballot next year in upscale districts. In Jefferson County, which includes Birmingham, and some of the state's wealthiest enclaves or little suburbs around Birmingham, Doug Jones, the Democrat, captured more than 68% of the vote. And in Madison County, which is where NASA's large facility is, Huntsville, Rocket City, Huntsville, Alabama, Jones won 57% of the vote in that area, the suburbs. And the Times puts it this way: while these Alabamians, many of whom women, may have been appalled by the claims of sexual misconduct against Mr. Moore, results like these were not isolated to this race, the political race. They mirrored returns in last month's statewide and legislative races in Virginia, a state filled with well-heeled suburbanites. These highly educated and high-income voters, while often open to supporting Republicans, why I can't figure out, but that's just the way it is. Anyway, they're uneasy with the hard-edged politics of President Trump. Hard-edged politics? How about the lying bullshit policies of Trump? The degenerate, disloyal to the United States, to the people of the United States, the treasonous bullshit of President Trump. Hard-edged politics just doesn't make it for me, the New York Times writers. If Republican candidates facing well-off voters next year do not find a way to separate themselves from Trump, they will face a punishing midterm election in 2018. Okay, the second reason is the turnout of African-American voters for Jones. And the Times says that Democrats struggled for years under Barack Obama to turn out African-American voters in off-year elections, which is what I was referencing last night when I probably let my racist attitude slip out. For Mr. Jones, robust black turnout was essential to victory. He poured resources into African-American outreach and even summoned black political leaders from out of state to help in the race's final days. So black voters turned out in force, handing Jones a decisive lead in Alabama cities and predominantly black rural counties. In Jefferson County, home to Birmingham and its whiter suburbs, turnout exceeded the 2014 governor's race by about 30%, and Mr. Jones nearly matched Hillary Clinton's vote total there. Other populous, heavily African-American counties, including Montgomery and Dallas County, where Selma is located, also exceeded the turnout in 2014. So, following last month's elections in Virginia and New Jersey, when African Americans helped push the Democrats to victory, the Alabama race is another sign that the party's most loyal voters are pretty fired up. And like I said last hour, Democratic Party leadership better goddamn well take note of that. The next reason, the Republicans are asking, who lost Alabama? Well, immediately after Jones's victory last night, establishment-aligned Republicans in Washington, the swamp dwellers, were assailing Moore and Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, as having handed a Senate seat in the reddest of red states to the Democrats. Would that were that easy, right? Stephen Law, who runs a super PAC controlled by Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, Stephen Law said, quote, not only did Steve Bannon cost us a critical Senate seat in one of the most Republican states in the country, but he also dragged the President of the United States into his fiasco. Oh, poor babies. But in a turnabout, Roy Moore's allies put the blame for his loss on Mitch McConnell. McConnell withdrew his support after the allegations emerged that Moore was a goddamn pedophile. Oh, well, Mitch, you should have just continued to support him, I guess is the way these fascist Christians think. Corey Stewart, who is challenging Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia for that seat and attended Moore's election night party, said, quote, they, referring to the establishment Republicans, they colluded with the Democrats to undermine a pro-Trump candidate like Judge Moore, just like they are going to do in 2018 to myself and other pro-Trump candidates. He added, this freak, Corey Stewart, he added, we're going through a civil war in the Republican Party. Well, if you are, you dumb shit, I hope the casualties are just more than your filthy Christian party can sustain. That's my hope. Moore's loss, the Times points out, will only exacerbate tensions between Senate leaders and the party's grassroots, and will probably play out in the series of House and Senate primaries in 2018. And if Republicans continue to nominate candidates who are too controversial to win general elections, the internal divisions of this filthy right-wing neo-fascist Christian party will lose control of Congress, which is the whole idea. And the fourth takeaway is Republicans' legislative math just got a lot tougher. The Times says the most immediate implications of the race will be in Congress, where Republicans have been struggling painfully to pass major legislation. What have they passed? They failed by single vote margins to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and the Senate only narrowly approved a deep tax cut whose final details are now being negotiated with the House of Representatives. Doug Jones' arrival in Washington will only make that math more daunting. Seizing on his victory, Democrats quickly insisted that Republicans should not vote on a final version of their tax plan until Jones is sworn into office later this month. Senator Kamala Harris of California tweeted last night, quote, Doug Jones should be seated immediately before we vote again on the tax bill, end quote. And Republicans may not bend to pressure on that front, though. Why should they wait until Doug Jones? These rotten sons of bitches left a Supreme Court justice seat open for 11 goddamn months. This is the kind of shit that Republicans do. Mainstream Republicans, this is what they do. The Christian fascist, redneck white Republicans, they walk around heavily armed and cause people to die when they're demonstrating, the white rednecks, in support of Nazism and Klanism and Bannonism and Trumpism. And maverick members of the Republicans' fragile minority, which includes Susan Collins of Maine and Bob Corker, Tennessee. Corker, of course, is not going to be there after, I guess he's there for another year. Those maverick members could have a far stronger hand in the Senate. I don't understand Susan Collins, and I don't understand Condoleezza Rice. I brought her up last night. She is an Alabama native and a war criminal, so I guess it really doesn't matter what she says. But as an American war criminal responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East, I would think that she would try to seek redemption. She had a chance when she was asked about the election in Alabama before the voting actually began, and she wouldn't endorse or not endorse either candidate. She just resorted to Condoleezza Rice Weasel Words. God damn, she was an expert at that, wasn't she? There are weasel words like the weasel words that come from a dumb shit like Trump, an uneducated slob like Trump. And then you have weasel words that will come from a highly educated, sophisticated woman like Condoleezza Rice. But either way, they're still weasel words. They're still just so scummy and shitty in the way they, especially Condoleezza Rice, the way she just couldn't bring herself to say, and she's not a government official now, so it would have been very easy for her to say, well, I am a Republican, and I know a lot of people in Alabama are Republicans. My advice would be to vote Democrat in this election, because the Republican candidate is a fucking child molester. Now, she could have left out the word fucking, but it would have been more effective had she left it in and just said that. But she's too cool for that. She's too sophisticated for that.